Hi friends, Mindy here. I have another process video for you today. I'm going to be continuing working in my little botanical journal here. I have part 1 of this. We'll link down below if you're interested. So today I want to work on sewing in the signatures and maybe starting some ephemera. So the first thing I need to do is put this paper down on the inside of my journal. I'm using this, it's like 6x8 paper. I'm just trimming it down. This was just in my stash and I just liked the look of it and the colors and everything. It's a little off on camera, but anyway, I just trimmed down the length of it, and they're going to overlap in the middle just a little bit, which is fine because that's where the signatures are going to be sewn in. I did want to ink this up just a little bit, so I did that to both of them. And I am going to use some double-sided adhesive. This is the scrapbook.com version. Score tape, red line tape, any of those are really good for this kind of project because they're super, super strong. So the scrapbook.com tape comes in different widths, and so whenever I'm doing journals, a lot of times I will use this particular width. So I'm just going to cover the back of both sheets of this with that double-sided adhesive, and then I'm using my bone folder and just rubbing over that just to burnish it down. It just makes tearing off the release paper just a little bit easier. So I have my little Tim Holtz like retractable awl pokey tool thing, and I just use that to get the release paper. It just helps a little bit. So I'm just kind of pulling it back, not all the way off, just pulling it just maybe halfway and kind of folding it. That's going to give me some wings to kind of work with this, so I can put this where I want to before I actually commit, because this tape is really, really, really strong and really sticky. And so you want a little bit of wiggle room, and so you can kind of just wiggle it around where you want it to go, and then when you finally figured out your placement, you just press down and then on the exposed part, and then I just pull the release paper. And then here I'm just kind of working this area down into the spine where this paper is, so that my spine will fold nice and neatly. So I don't want my paper to crack, so I'm just using my bone folder here right in the crease of that, and just kind of going over it, gently folding, and I do that multiple times. So I'm going to do that same exact process with this other sheet, and then again you can see me just kind of working with it. I'm going to fold the cover kind of back on itself. Again, just working that seam right there, just so that my cover is going to fold, close nice and easy instead of wanting to kind of open back up. So I have my 2 signatures from before, and I want to get them kind of in line. I want to get all the papers in line because some of them are different sizes. I want to make sure that I'm going to be able to stitch them. So on some of them, I'm putting like this braille paper I put in the middle. These 2 that were like different sizes, I kind of put one at the top and one at the bottom. I'm just going to go through here for both signatures and just kind of make sure that everything is where I want it to be, just lining everything up. You could certainly just line everything up down at the bottom if you wanted to, but I just wanted to make sure everything was where I want it. And I'm putting a clip here on the top of one side and the bottom of the other. That's just going to hold that in place while I punch my holes and do everything for for binding these in. So I am going to be using a 3-hole pamphlet stitch to do this, and I want to create a little template. So I just have a little piece of scrap paper that I'm just kind of getting an idea for. I'm really just using the folds of this to get the width of the spine. Certainly you could measure that, but this was just as easy. So and then I'm just going to use my ruler. Like I said, this is like copy paper, so it's super thin. And then I'm just making sure that fits down in the spine, and then I want to mark the height, because this is going to be the template both for the holes that I'm going to make in the cover and the holes that I'm going to make in the signatures, so that everything lines up nice and neatly. Now, if I'm doing a 1 signature journal, I don't do this. I usually just eyeball it, but for this, I want the stitches to be even and all that kind of stuff. So I am measuring now this piece of paper, which ended up being like 1.5 inches. And so I'm making 2 dots here that are equal distant apart from the edge and from each other. And I'm marking that in multiple places on this piece of paper. And then I'm going to connect all of those lines. And that will be the line that my my signatures are sewn in. And so I want to find the center. Obviously the easiest thing to do is fold it in the middle. And then where those fold or cross, that's where my middle stitch is going to go. And you can fold this up and put a stitch here, but to me, I just like it to be a little bit longer. So this is just a way to kind of keep it so that everything is kind of the same distance apart. So then I just folded that again back on itself. And I'm just making sure that these are going to hit in the right spot on my signatures, because my signature obviously is not as wide as the spine or as tall as the spine. So again, just kind of folding this back on itself here so that it's about the same distance. And I'm going to mark those. You can kind of see where I have those 3 holes for each of the signatures. And then I'm marking that this is the top because I don't want to get it confused when I am sewing everything together. I'm working on a foam mat for this cover. I have a heavy duty awl here that I'm going to be using. You could use a foam book, you could use a mouse pad, you know, just you want to protect your work surface. So I'm just going to go where those lines intersected, and I am going to poke my holes. So that will be the holes that I need for my signature. And now I'm just going to kind of eyeball where I want my actual signature to fall, and I'm going to make a little line at the top of it so that I know to line everything up to that, and then make sure that everything is the way that I want it to be. So the easiest thing to do here is I'm just folding along that first line so that this will sit down in the gutter of my signature, this first signature. This is just going to make it easier. Now you could use that same like foam thing to punch your holes, but I happen to have a book cradle, which is just a little bit easier because it just kind of holds everything. Again, the gutter of a book is a really, or like if you have an old phone book, really good way to do this. If you don't have a book cradle, I happen to have one, so I'm going to use it. But again, I'm just poking those same 3 holes. And then the only thing that I'm doing, and now I'm going to move to the second signature, so I'm folding it along that line. And it's not hard to do that because the holes kind of act as the guide for you to fold, if that makes sense. And so the only thing that you want to do is just make sure that, especially if you're doing this with a journal that has multiple signatures, more than like 2, you want to make sure that you're keeping all of your signatures in the right order, so that they're being punched properly. And then I'm also making sure to line it up with that line that I drew at the top. And so now I need to get my thread. So I'm using waxed linen thread. I just happen to have this in this kind of yellowish color that really just coordinates with a lot of things. And you want it to be about 2.5 to 3 lengths of the spine, you know, the height of your book. So I cut 2 of those, 1 for each signature. And I'm going to start with a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. So I'm going through the middle hole and I'm going from the inside to the out. If you want your little strings on the outside, you can just do this the opposite way. But and then I'm coming back in through the top hole. I had to wiggle that around a little bit. And then I'm going to go all the way down now to the bottom hole on the inside and go back out to the outside. And you want to make sure you're leaving a tail on the inside as well. And then I'm just kind of pulling tight, making sure everything is okay. I needed to adjust a little bit. I had too long of a tail, so it was hard to get that thread back into the inside. So I'm just adjusting there, and I'm going to come back through the middle. You just want to make sure you're not splitting your thread, or you won't be able to pull the thread tight once it gets back in there. So I'm pulling this here, and you want to make sure you have 1 tail on either side of that long string, and then I'm just pulling it tight, double checking on the outside to make sure everything's nice and tight. And I'm going to tie a knot right here. I may tie a bow later, but I'm just going to leave these long for now. I'll deal with them later. So another thing is I like to start from the back signature and work to the front. It just makes it a little bit easier for me for some reason, because you're not trying to hold all of the signatures in place while you're sewing. So for me, working from back to front is just the easiest. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this top signature. And again, just making sure that you keep them all in order. You can kind of see right here, I wanted to slow this down where I split that thread. This is what I was talking about. So if you have that, where you do that, just pull your needle back out and then just try to go back into the hole and just make sure that you're not doing that. If you split your thread like that, which I end up doing again when I come up through the middle here, I had to pull it off of the needle, you will not be able to tighten that signature down. You just can't pull the threads. So you just want to make sure that you correct that if you have done it, which I do it all the time. You just have to kind of readjust. So then I'm going to go back through and do that same process. Here you can see that it just was not tight enough. So I always check that thread that's running down the length of the journal, and then I always check my outsides before I tie that final knot. So now I'm just going to move to kind of decorating some of the pages. I'm not going to get all of this done in this video, but I just thought it would get a start. I do have this, image that I talked about in the last video. This is kind of the inspiration for this whole journal was this particular image from a book, and so I want to make sure that it's on that first page. So I had to trim it down because it was just a little bit too big. I used a decal edge trimmer for that, and then I am just gluing down. I hated to lose some of the patina of that book page, but it just happened that way, but that's okay. So it's on that first page of that first signature, and then I'm going to trim down this Tim Holtz paper and cover this first page of this second signature. I just kind of want to cover up some of that really busy pattern just because it doesn't seem as cohesive with everything else. So this just kind of helps tone it down a little bit. I did save the piece that I trimmed off of the top of that paper, and I'm going to create a pocket with it. So I'm just tearing the edges, just using a ruler. And I like the rough edge. I think it takes ink really well that way. And I didn't want to lose the writing across the top of that. So I'm going to make a little thumb notch here just with a circle punch. If you have one of those notch punches, that works too. But I did go ahead and ink the edge of that as well, and then just trying to find a place where I want it. And I'm going to go around the very, very edge of this pocket and put some liquid glue. I'm using Barely Art. No, I'm not using Barely Arts. I am using Art Glitter Glue. I do like Barely Arts glue, but I'm going to line this up down at the bottom because my image is, kind of is cut off, so that it will just kind of make more sense if it's hanging off right at the edge of the page, if that makes sense. And then I had this journaling card that I had created prior to starting this journal on film anyway, and I'm just going to ink up the edge of that and tuck this in this pocket. I'm not sure if it's going to live in this pocket right now. I do like it, but it may get moved around eventually. And then I found in my stash this mulberry paper. This was from my Your Creative Studio subscription back when I had it. And so one of the tricks to using mulberry paper, if you want to cut it and get that nice kind of frayed edge, this works with rice paper as well, is you just take some water. This I happen to have just like a water brush, that's like a paintbrush with water in it, and you just draw it along there. This works with napkins too. If you wanted to do decoupaging with napkins, you can do this the same way, and then it'll tear super, super easy, and then you can kind of just fray it. Now I'm going along just the very, very edge of the top and just using just my fingernail. I just wanted the whole pocket to be kind of that frayed, just have that extra texture, and I loved this piece of mulberry because it had that nice, beautiful leaf in it. So I'm just being careful over here on the corner because I do have, for some reason, that corner got really, really wet. So I'm just being careful there, and then I'm just going to make this into a pocket. And I thought putting it on this green, I think it's called onion skin paper, is just the texture of them, and just it just made that like leaf really stand out. So I really liked it on this page. So just adding my art glitter glue around here, and then I'm going to glue this little pocket right here on the edge. And I also had from that same subscription this vellum that has like a yellow, a very faint yellow and green foliage in the background. Here I thought I would put it on this the Tomo River paper because it's nice and bright white, and so it will make that image show up a little bit better. And then I realized that was looking at the wrong side of it, so the image was actually darker on the other side. So I'm going to just use the same piece. I'm just going to have to put it on the back side so it'll tuck right into that corner. But you can kind of see here the yellows kind of pop out of this just a little bit more this way. So this is vellum. So I'm doing this glue right along the edge. You have to kind of be careful with liquid adhesive and vellum because it can cause the vellum to curl just a little bit. So I'm just being very careful just right along the edge. And another thing, whenever I'm making pockets, I like to use a liquid glue because it will dry. Whereas if you could certainly use like a double-sided adhesive, but that adhesive is always going to be kind of tacky. So if you stick something down in there far enough, it could get stuck in there. So I just always prefer to use a liquid glue when making pockets. So anyway, I have another piece of vellum here that's a printed vellum, and I'm going to create another pocket. This one has this really beautiful, like darker green along the edge of it. So I cut that down, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this, and I'm actually going to put the glue on the paper, and then I'll trim the pocket down. So this pocket basically goes the whole width of the paper, and I'm putting it on one of those coffee dyed pages that I have in there, and it's not going to show up. You won't be able to see the glue line or anything on there. And then I'm going to use this other half for another pocket in the other signature, but on this one I'm putting it on the craft paper that has the dot grid, just to give that some more interest as well. And I'm just doing it the same way, just added the glue on the paper, and then I will come through and then trim that off, and that'll just give me a nice pocket to work with, and it'll add a little bit of interest for that particular paper. And then I decided to stop making pockets here because I have these 4 pieces. These were the ones that I cut off when I was creating the journal from the 49 in Market paper, and I just want to make some tags out of these. So these will go in some pockets that I create later. They're going to be tall, skinny tags, and that's fine. If you so you can kind of just do this a couple of ways. You can just kind of cut the corners there, and then you like flip it over backwards, and then you can kind of see I'm doing it here. Flip it over backwards, and then use that as a guide to trim it, and that way both of your sides are the same. I'm just going to use an old tag that I have sitting in my stash and just trim it that way. Another thing that you could do is if you you could use like an old credit card and kind of make your cut on a credit card, and then you have that as a template to always use. I just always kind of tend to use just an old tag that I have sitting around because I always have tags around. So like I said, these are kind of tall and skinny. I may cut down the tops of a couple of these later on. I haven't quite decided, but for now I like the tall and skinny. And then I have this little clear sticker. It's just been in my stash forever. I think it was probably from your Creative Studio subscription, to be honest. And so I'm just going to use this down on the bottom of the tag. I cut off the excess, and then I'm just going to add it back over on the left side just to bring a little bit of color on there. And then I have this other tall skinny tag that I wanted to add something onto, and I remembered that I had pulled out those book pages, and so I trimmed out one of the images from that. I just fussy cut that, and I'm going to use some glue and use this vintage book page on here as the focal point. I may add something more to these tags later on, but for right now, this is just kind of getting me started with creating the ephemera now that is going to go into that journal. So that's all I'm going to do on camera for today. I didn't want this video to be too long, but I will do some more ephemera in another video. So if you did like this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and until next time, bye.